Hi, this is Heidi from Garden Crossings, and it is a beautiful December day today. The sun is out, and it's very comfortable out today. It's not so windy, so it's a nice day that you can be outside, and probably should have a coat, but I'm not going to do it because I don't love coats if I don't need to wear them. Anyways, we are at my home garden today, and I want to take you for a walk through the home garden and just show you some of the things that are interesting this time of year. Certainly it's not going to be as colorful or as beautiful as what it is during the summer, but I do think that there's a lot of things that even in the winter time that can stand out and be of interest. For those of you who are new to our station, we are located in a zone 5B 6A garden here in western Michigan. So all the plants that you see here will be hardy down to at least a zone 5. Also, if you're new to the station, I recommend that you subscribe to our channel. That way you'll get notified of all the new videos that we put up. If you haven't yet, take a look back at some of the summer videos and get some beautiful inspiration just to get you ready for your planning mode for your garden in 2023. So let's go ahead and take a walk through the garden. We'll start off here at the front of the house, as we quite frequently do. You'll notice all the mums that are in the ground, they have completely been frozen many times at this point in the season. So we'll either come through, we'll probably just leave them in there until next spring, because if we pull them out, it's going to leave a big hole in the ground. And if we're plowing snow or shoveling, that hole would be something we could potentially fall into if we're not paying attention. So we're going to just leave these mums in the ground. You'll notice there's some ornamental grass there on either side of those rock pillars. Those are annual grasses, and they were gorgeous all summer long. And we're going to leave them up here for the winter just to add a little winter interest. I know they're kind of crispy and brown, but I do think that it's kind of pretty, just giving that little bit of columnar height in that space. We've done a lot with cut greens, so let's take a look at some of the different things that have been put together. So the first one is a winter sled, where we took some branches from different spruces, arborvitaes, etc., and made a little swag, tied a bow around it. Found these rather large but cute snow skates or ice skates, and just created kind of a cute little winter thing there. Now I'm curious, for those of you who are in the south and really don't get snow, would this be like a totally ridiculous thing to put in front of your house? I'm guessing it probably would, but I'm very curious. So from those of you that don't get snow, would this fly at your house? Also, we redid our hanging baskets, and I love repurposing the hanging baskets. So in the spring, we'll put pansies and sometimes some heuchera, and then summer, obviously, beautiful annuals. Fall, we do the mums and other fall things. And then in the winter here, we took again some cut greens, some spruce, some pine. We've got some beautiful dried hydrangeas, and I'll try to get it from the other angle too, where the sun's shining on it. We did use fake berries because I don't have any mature hollies yet that give me enough berries. There's some beautiful red twigs in there, and then some birch poles. So just really filling out the baskets, because as long as you've got them hanging, you might as well have something pretty in them. Next, I have my porch planter, and we ripped out all of the annuals that were in here. And let me get the sun shining. I'm totally there we go. So in this porch planter here, again, I have evergreens, there's spruces, there's pine, there's arborvitae, there's dried hydrangeas. We have some red twig dogwood in there, which is given the height. And then in the very back there is some of those white birch poles. Also, I put in a few fake berries in here as well, and then some sticks that have some twinkle lights. So this will just kind of twinkle at night. Put a couple of the extra large ornaments in there just to give that little splash of red, and then use that bow to kind of finish it off. So you'll notice in the front, some of the evergreens I have, they're kind of that drooping, weeping habit. So even in my winter containers, I do that thriller, filler, and spiller look, just because I love having the height, the medium centers all filled out, and then the draping, wispy things in the front. Here are the hanging baskets, maybe a little bit better angle. Although I thought there'd be sun on them, but there's not. But maybe you can see them just a little bit better here. It's actually, I got home in time that there is some sun out. Usually by the time I get home, it's dark. Usually it starts getting dark around here around 4:30 or so. So by the time I get home from work, to come out here and do this, it's really hard to do. Beautiful plant here. This is the proudberry bush. I'm going to say it probably wrong, but the Sympacarpus. Beautiful, beautiful bubblegum pink berries all over this plant. Gets about 3 foot tall and 3 foot wide. So if this is something that looks good to you, head to the website gardencrossings.com and just type proudberry in the search, and you can get more information as far as its hardiness and such. That is one thing I will say when I'm walking through the garden, my mind, I can remember a lot of things, but I can't remember all the things. So if there is a plant that I mention and you want more information on it, do head to the website gardencrossings.com so that you can get all the information. A lot of people, when I get done with the videos, say, you know, we need to know the hardiness and such. Well, unfortunately, I just don't have all these things remembered in my head, so I'll try to give you as much information as I can, but when there's just so many plants that we talk about in a video, it's hard to know all the things. So what we're seeing here, these are the Anna's Magic Ball arborvitaes. In the summer, they're really green. Right now, they actually have more of a yellowy hue to them. And I say that, in the summer, they also have a yellow hue to them. But this time of year, they look different. More of a golden yellow, I guess, than the bright yellow that we see in the summer. So the Anna's Magic Ball, these are very mature plants. Probably been in here for at least 8 years now. They're about 3 foot tall and 3 foot wide. I get a lot of comments on these as well. Just people are just amazed at how big the plants actually are, and they really do get quite large, well, relatively speaking, when they're a mature plant. All the plants have been trimmed in the garden. This is Hydrangea Quickfire, which is a hardy hydrangea. All of the hardy or paniculata hydrangeas have been trimmed back. This one is still probably 6 foot tall or so, but all the flowers and such have been taken off of it. So it's ready to go for next year. As we walk down the hill, we've got a Bobo hydrangea. We have Pugster butterfly bush. Now the Pugster butterfly bush, we did not do any trimming on this fall, and that was very intentional because here in Michigan, butterfly bush usually die back to the ground, so it takes a while for them to recover. So we're gonna just leave everything on there that's added winter insulation, and hopefully they'll flower sooner this year, or this coming year. This past year, they really didn't start flowering till August, when they probably should have been blooming already in July. But because we trimmed them back, it just took them that much longer to get to the point of flowering. A few more hydrangeas here. Bobo right in front of us again. This is a smooth or arborescent hydrangea. This one also blooms on new wood, so this one was trimmed back. But you can see for us, everything gets trimmed back in the fall. And the biggest reason is because we don't have time to do it in the spring. So if we can get to it in the fall, we get to it. And that way the garden is just fresh and ready when spring rolls around. The hellebore we did not trim back, or Lenten rose. So those will stay pretty much green all winter long. A few more hydrangeas there against the house. The one thing we did not trim was the Alstroemeria Inca Ice. And the reason is this was still blooming in November. So I told the girls, I said, do not trim this back because I just want to see how long it goes. Now they probably won't get back in the garden again until next spring. So this will stay like this for the winter. But this plant literally had flowers on it well into November and was absolutely gorgeous. I think too, one thing that's kind of nice is people often ask how many plants are planted in that space. Well, this did start off as one plant, and the clump just continually got larger and larger. And this is one plant that I'm not going to split, at least certainly not at this point, because I just love the mass of flowers that blooms virtually all summer long, just right here on the corner in this garden. Under the deck here, all of the hostas have all been trimmed all the way back to the ground. There's a few hellebore in here, and you can see those. Those are the green little mounds. And actually, this is so funny. Wow. Let me go in and take a closer look because I am seeing a little surprise here. These normally bloom in like March, April, but look at that. We've got a bud and it's December. We have a flower and another one. That is so cool. I believe this one is called Wedding Bells. I could be wrong. I'll try to double check that, but I think this one is called Wedding Bells. But look at all those buds. Well, that's a fun welcome surprise, even though it's not supposed to be doing that. More arborescent or smooth hydrangeas. Here, they've been trimmed back to about 2 foot. Got some Nepeta kind of lining the brick wall there. And those had been trimmed several times throughout the summer, but they just continually bloom. So they were still blooming when garden cleanup was done. So that's why they haven't been trimmed back. But those will be good like that for the winter. Also, columbine is starting to sprout again. That won't get to the flowering stage, but it's just interesting when you trim things back. When you do get little warm points in the cold season, things do sometimes get confused and start to sprout. Here is the Atlas rose. We trimmed all the flowers off the top and all the rose hips off. So that's about 3 foot tall or so. I know a lot of people ask about trimming roses, so I'll touch on that here in just a few minutes when we get to more roses. There was the mini Mauvette hydrangea here in front of the shed. Those been trimmed back to about 18 inches or so. Daylilies and everything that was in here all trimmed back. One thing I do like to leave though is ornamental grasses, and I think the reason why is because they add a lot of really pretty motion. You can see it kind of blowing there in the breeze to the winter garden, and even though it's kind of dry and crispy, it's really pretty, that movement and the plumes and such. So that will get trimmed back in the spring. One thing, if you're doing porch planters, those plumes make really nice cut stems in your porch planters. So if you still have ornamental grasses up and you're looking for a little thriller to put into your porch planters, give those a little trim and stick them in. Head over here to the garden over here. So this is where we're going to talk a little bit more about roses, because there's 3 Atlas roses in this garden and they still have blooms. They're frozen, but they still have blooms. So this Atlas rose was blooming well into November, and had it not gotten cold here, which of course it's going to, it's Michigan, right? Look at all those buds. A lot of buds that would have still had a chance to go ahead and open. So with this plant here, if you have something looking like this right now and you want to trim it back, go ahead and trim it back. Typical recommendation would be to trim about the top third or so off of the plant, but if it's taller than what you want, you could probably even trim it in half if you would like to. So in this situation, getting rid of that top third is going to get rid of all those buds and all the blooms and any rose hips that might still remain. We usually do a pretty good job of keeping up on the roses with trimming them as the flowers fade and removing all the rose hips and such, because we want to encourage more growth. So as we're trimming the spent blooms, that just encourages more growth. Here we have a dwarf lilac. This is a bloomerang dwarf lilac. And even this guy here into the fall was trying to do some blooming. We'll go in close. Maybe you can see those buds there. Had it stayed warm a little longer, those would have all turned into flowers. And you can see there's here and here. So the dwarf, or the bloomerang lilacs in general, they're a reblooming lilac. Their spring bloom is the most floriferous, the biggest show of color. But if you can get any type of rebloom on a lilac throughout the summer, those are all just like bonus. Take the season longer with a beautiful smell of lilac. In the middle there is our standard hydrangea. This was a limelight tree, And we trimmed this guy back really, really aggressive. So if you look back at some of my summer videos, you'll be able to see how big it was. And now you can see how big it is. So it's probably only about 4 foot tall right now. And it was well up into 6 foot. We did a lot of removing of weak branches and stuff. So now we have just a lot of main branches, and we'll see how it comes back next year. Sometimes when you do trimming on the hydrangeas, especially as aggressive as what you're going to see in the rest of my garden, it can cause for sometimes weak branches the next year, but it can also create really, really large blooms. So you may not have as many blooms because there's not as much branching, but the blooms you get will be just huge. So something that's very interesting to see. I've had limelights that are about 18 inches long by about 12 inches wide, the blooms that were that big. And that's at least twice, if not 3 times the size of what they normally are. So all summer I was talking about in this bed how we really needed to take the Bobo hydrangeas down, get them smaller because they were just huge. So about Bobo hydrangea, when people think about them, they think of about a 3 to 4 foot maybe hydrangea. Mine were 5 to 6 foot. And we really hadn't done a very aggressive trim on them ever. So this year we decided we're going to go in and do an aggressive trim. These are about 24 inches tall now. We took off as much of the thin branching as we could, left all the main stalks. So this is something we're going to want to watch and see, like next summer, what it's going to look like. If I had to predict and guess right now, we're going to probably have, it might be a little floppy, maybe, but I think we're going to have really big blooms on Bobo, bigger than what we normally see. This is a butterfly bush. This is the Miss Molly. And like the pugsters we talked about earlier, I'm not going to trim this back. I want to keep as much of the growth on here as possible, just to create some protection for the winter. This one too took a while to not recover, but took a while to flower this year because we did trim it way back. So I'm hoping that we'll get earlier flowers because I left some of the old growth on. Another Bobo hydrangea. And then we'll just kind of tuck into here and see. This is the Weigela Sonic Bloom Pink. So this was trimmed back to about 3.5 foot or so. We took about the top third off of it, shaped it up, and that'll be nicely shaped for next year. That's a reblooming Weigela. It blooms 3 to 4 cycles throughout the summer, and that's true of all the Sonic blooms. There's a new dark-leafed pink flower one coming out in 2023, so be on the lookout for that. Again, I'm just showing you this just to show you how everything pretty much has been trimmed right back to the base. The yellow tomato cage you're seeing here, this is for delphinium. So I love delphinium. They're tall. Sometimes it gets windy back here and then they kind of flip over and break. So we put a tomato cage in the garden and chose yellow just for something fun. And that's worked really well the last couple years to hold the delphinium upright so they don't crack and split. So something to think about if you have delphinium or really any type of flower, maybe even hollyhocks that flop over. Get a tomato cage, and before they start growing in the spring, let them just kind of grow and intermingle through that cage. You really won't see the cage because the foliage will pretty much cover it up. This is the Firelight hydrangea, trimmed back to, it's probably about 4 foot or so. Took about the top third or so off of that. If you have questions on trimming hydrangeas, I did a huge series of hydrangea trimming this fall, so you can go back and look at those videos as well if you have any questions on how to trim hydrangeas or how we trimmed ours. Some of you may not dare go aggressive. We went very aggressive. So the video might be helpful for you just to see how aggressive you may dare go. This little area here is our shade garden. So this is where all the hostas usually live. They've all been trimmed back. And one thing I'm finding quite interesting, I mean, obviously there's no leaves on the tree, so this is probably part of the reason, But this area is never sunny this time of day. So, I mean, there's pine trees here, so they really don't lose their leaves. So it's just, I think, the angle of the sun this time of year that's letting a lot of sun in this space. So if this were the case in the summer, this may not be the best place for my hostas. But thank goodness the sun is where it is in the summer, that this is a nice, very shady, cute corner for the hostas to go in. The green there is Pulmonaria. That one stays pretty much evergreen. And that's a planting of 3. Few heuchera in here that still are showing some color, but for the most part they too are just kind of flopped and fizzled. Some hellebore, Brunnera, stays fairly evergreen, although it's fairly flat. So I mentioned I didn't really want to wear a coat, but I probably should have wore some gloves. The fingers are getting chilly. So out back here, there's some rhododendron. Problem with those is the deer kind of like them, and the deer sometimes come and nibble through here. There's a creek on the other side of that hill, so they kind of follow the creek through. There's some heuchera that look really nice. I believe those are Mahogany Monster, and those are looking pretty. Lavender there, still lavendery. Actually, it's not at all lavendery. It's got kind of a nice blue-green foliage, but we didn't trim that back. Up on the back hill, we're going for a closer look. We do have some holly back here, and these holly were planted several years ago, and they just, they don't do anything. I do have a male, I do have a female, so I've got that going. So I'm not sure what the deal is with them. I might have to rip them out because these should be like 6-7 foot tall by now. This one here was supposed to be yellow. It's not really so great. This one is good. I think this one's the male, so like this one I can leave in and that'll be fine. So I think I need to get a couple female to replace these yellow holly that really aren't doing great. My thought was number 1 berries, but even if I could trim that, that would be pretty in the winter porch pots, but it's just not doing what I was hoping. Sometimes that happens. So as long as we're this close, we'll just take a look here at the creek. It's only about 3-4 inches right now, but if we get a good rain, it really does fill up. One thing you'll notice here is there is a tarp on the back of this hillside. So there was so many aggressive weeds back here that we didn't want it to get into our garden beds. So we had to come up with a solution of what to do. So we put the tarp down, hoping to smother the weeds, and it looks like it's working pretty good. There's not a whole ton of weed, the big weeds anyways. There's a lot of little, I think it's called chickweed or something. There's a lot of that in here. But the big prickery viney ones seem to be gone. So ideally, this would be a great spot for us to plant like a juga or an aggressive ground cover just to hold this bank, because we've really have lost quite a bit of bank over the years. Here's a beautiful arborvitae, and I love this one because it's got yellow foliage. So this is one that I will use in my porch pots sometimes just to give just a little added splash of color. I don't like to trim in here too much because I don't want to create holes, kind of like you can see I did there. But just to take a couple little sprigs out, just to add that little splash of yellow, is really pretty in my winter containers. Planted back there next to it, Rod one time went on a field trip and bought some plants at another garden center, and this was some of the things he bought. This is supposed to be like a globe looking blue spruce type of plant, and we really didn't have any place in our yard for it, so I'm like, plant it out by the creek, it'll be fine out there. So it's a pretty plant, like nice blue foliage, but it's pokey. And then also tucked in the corner, and I never can get to this plant in the spring because the foliage is so thick, is a gorgeous rhododendron. So sometimes I'll be able to peek through and see the purple blooms, but I need to find a better place. I'll leave that one, but I need to find a better place for those because I love that plant, and I want it to be more predominant somewhere in my garden. And as long as we're in here, this is my neighbor's yard, and you can see it's just a whole bunch of weeds and junk and all that kind of stuff, which whatever, that's fine, it's his. But what we did to kind of block that out and hopefully hold back, sorry, I'm trying to get to the plants here, some of the stuff, is we planted some limelight hydrangeas just to kind of create just a little bit of a border there. So that way in the summertime, we really don't have to see anything that's back in there. Granted, there's always leaves on the trees, so that kind of hides all the junk too. But I think it's really pretty to look at the limelights with this border that was created. All right, making my way through the mess and forward. This little part of the garden here has a lot of hardy hibiscus, leucanthemum, what else? Anemone, a lot of fall blooming things. So we do put annuals in here just to add a splash of color, but it does look really pretty when the late summer and fall things start blooming. We did a little clearing out here of an incredible hydrangea that literally, well, it's right here, but it took all this open space. So the girls came through and dug out all of the pieces that made their way through the garden. So now I have this big open space that I'm excited to plant something in next year. Not sure what it's going to be yet, but I have my eyes on a few of the new varieties that we'll be introducing in 2023. So you may wonder, okay, how did that incredible hydrangea move? Well, with that plant, the branch laid on the ground, and basically as a branch laid on the ground, it kind of created roots and rooted itself down into the ground, therefore creating another plant. So that is how the incredible made its way further in the garden than what was intended. Invincible Spirit is that little round one there with a spirea in front. Allium Millennium, a nice little grouping there. And there was 5 plants, I thought. So I think I had the gardeners remove this spirea here. There was 3 of them, and they were super close to the border. So I'm like, that's way too close. We need to get rid of 2 of them. So they did, but I'm wondering, maybe not. I'm wondering if an allium came out. So we might need to plant 1 more because a grouping of 4 seems kind of weird. So we'll have to get another one in there just to kind of fill the area out. Rhamnus Fine Line, that's this tall one here. So it does drop its leaves in the winter, but because it's just so tight, the stems are so tight, it's kind of nestling in and holding all of the foliage still. We're going for a closer look here. Get a good wind and these leaves will drop off, but because it's such a dense plant, those leaves are just kind of being nestled in and still held. But this is a great plant for columnar interest. You can see it's only about 3 foot wide, but it's about 10 foot tall. So really a nice plant if you're looking to create something with kind of a pillar look in the garden. It isn't evergreen, but it looks pretty in the summer. Here's another proudberry bush. This one here is about 5 foot tall. All the beautiful berries. So the birds don't necessarily love these berries, but these berries are really pretty just to add this color into the late season garden. One thing I'm doing is a trial on Alstroemeria. So I planted, well, what do you have? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 Alstroemeria this summer. They are hardy in zones 8 to 10. Like I mentioned earlier, we're zone 5B, 6A. So I don't think any of these are going to overwinter, but I'm curious to see. So we left them in and we'll see if they come back next year. Sometimes because of that creek, I get zone 7 plants that will overwinter. So zone 8 is stretching it, but who knows? It'll be really cool though if they do come back. If they don't, I'll be planting more because they were really gorgeous. So even though for some of us, some of you, not me, some of you, these are a perennial, those of us in the north, we have to plant them as an annual. I'm okay with that because they bloom all summer long. So if I can have a plant, even if it's supposed to be a perennial somewhere, is an annual for me, but it blooms all summer, that is a win. This little area here is new plants for 2023, so we'll kind of show you updates on those next summer as they grow. Weigela Wine and Roses, one of the first plants in the garden, along with the sticks of Limelight. These are more new plants for 2023, so we'll watch those. Here is Limelight, and this one got the most dramatic trimming of all of the plants this fall. So this is in a video as well. This plant was probably 8, if not 10 foot tall, and we really chopped it back hard. So this is the one next year that I'm curious to see, but last time when we did this, we had the 18-inch blooms by about 12 inches wide. So we'll really be curious to see what the blooms will do this year. But this was in a very aggressive trim, and sometimes you just have to do it. If plants aren't living up to, and I shouldn't say living up, if plants aren't doing what you want them to do, it's okay to be aggressive and to trim them. Because the worst case scenario is if you don't love a plant and you trim it and it dies, you just dig it out and put a new one in. So sometimes when a plant dies, it's a blessing because you were just waiting for that new spot out in the garden. So that is what's currently going on in my garden right now. Not a lot of color, but definitely I think there was some things that had some interest to them. If you have any questions or comments on anything that I talked about today, feel free to leave your questions or comments below. And as I said in the beginning, if you're new to our YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe so that you can get updated on all of the videos that we'll be posting. This winter we'll be posting a lot of videos on individual plants, showing you them in real life garden settings so that you can know what to expect and what a plant will look like when it's planted in your garden. This is Heidi from Garden Crossings.